Join us now for an insight with Carl Sommer.
All of us grandparents want our grandchildren to be happy and successful. Currently, my wife and I have 17 grandchildren and one on the way. One of the best ways to help our grandchildren to become successful is to encourage a love for reading. Children who are read to develop a love for reading and do better academically, even in kindergarten. Reading to your grandchildren is also an excellent method of bonding to them. It has been some of my greatest joys having my grandchildren sitting on my lap while I read to them. I want to tell you about an important statement concerning reading to children. In the book, Helping Your Child Become a Reader, published by the Partnership for Reading, Bringing Scientific Evidence to Learning, this book, co-sponsored by the National Institute for Literacy, National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, U.S. Department of Education, and U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Listen carefully to what it states. Quote, reading aloud to children has been called the single most important activity for building the knowledge required for success in reading. End of quote. One of the main objectives in reading to grandchildren should be to make reading time an enjoyable, shared learning activity. When you read to your young grandchildren, it fosters a creative thinking, increases vocabulary, develops language, instills a love for reading, encourages listening skills, stimulates imagination, and bonds you to your grandchildren. Since a love for reading is crucial for educational success, start reading to your grandchildren even before they are 1 year old. Babies love to hear their grandparents' voice. Put the baby in your lap and show him the pictures and let him play with the picture books. Babies at this age love to look at pictures and flip pages. As they get older, pick age-appropriate books. Reading aloud may be the most important gift that you can be given to your grandchildren for their educational success. Be tolerant of the toddler's inability to sit still and listen. Reading sessions should be short, and activity and dialogue should be encouraged. Let your grandchild become part of the reading activity. Point to a picture. Let your grandchild tell what it is. If the picture has animals, let your child make animal sounds to correspond with the picture. Let shared reading be fun time. Let your reading session be cozy and a moment of affection. Don't hesitate to read your grandchild's favorite story over and over again. Children love repetition. As your grandchildren get older, get interesting books that help your children learn principles on how they can become successful. When birthdays and holidays come, give books as presents. Above all, make reading fun times for your grandchildren. Dr. Lee M. McGee and Dr. Judith A. Schickendans in The Reading Teacher co-authored the article, Repeated Interactive Read-Alouds in Preschool and Kindergarten. They state that the way books are shared with children matters. Research has demonstrated that the most effective read-alouds are those in which children are actively involved, asking and answering questions and making predictions rather than passively listening. Some of the findings that McGee and Schickendans point out are invite preschoolers and kindergartners to retell or dramatize stories. Read books repeatedly. Encourage children to use the words of the book. That's when they're answering the questions. Asking thoughtful questions. Calling for analytic talk. Children are inquisitive, so endeavor to answer their questions. Sometimes children's why questions will even stump philosophers. They can come up with some questions. Their little minds are eager to learn. So use your imagination in these creative times to instill valuable knowledge. When I first began writing my books, I made books in black and white and just put some binders on them And I made these copies. They're black. They're just sketches from the artist, and some were hand-colored. And there's just, I made a number of them. And what I did, this one was hand-colored. And so what I did then, I wanted to test them out. You know, it's very important in beginning writing to find out how your books are. So I read to my granddaughter, Stephanie, when she was 3 years old. And I read 9 stories to her. And then I finally said, Stephanie, that's enough. And she goes, read one more story. Now, what are you going to do when your little 3-year-old says, read one more story? So I read her another story. Amazingly, she sat and listened for 2 hours as I read 10 stories to her. And this is not like the books I have now. These are black and white and just hand coloring. But don't expect this from all children. Recently, I received a letter from Susan Titus Osborne. She is the director of Manuscript Critique Service, an adjunct professor at Hope International University in Fullerton, California, and at Concordia University in Irvine, California. She has authored 28 books, including the best-selling Heartlifters for Sisters, and numerous articles, devotionals, and curriculum materials. She has taught at over 135 writers' conferences across the U.S. and in 7 foreign countries. She wrote me this letter, quote, as you know, I recently purchased an entire set of your summertime story picture books for my granddaughters, Isabella, age 3, and Zoa, 18 months. We took them with us to London and presented them on Isabella's 3rd birthday. I thought she would be too young for them, but I was totally wrong. She loves them and had my husband and I read book after book to her. Sometimes Zoa would grab a book, toddle over to one of us and say, book, book, as she held out her hands to be lifted up onto our laps. One day I needed to catch up on my email, so I asked Grandpa to read to Isabella. She climbed up on his lap and he read one of the summertime storybooks. When he finished, she hopped down and got another, and then another, and another. He read her 8 of your books in a row. They held her attention that whole time. I think the most precious time we spent with our granddaughters in London was curled up on the couch with them on our laps, reading a book, end of quote. Let me say this. Not all of my grandchildren are like this. The key is to make reading an enjoyable time for our grandchildren.